My friends always say I like to make life hard for myself. You should focus on life. Why are you thinking so much about death? But it just wouldn't go away. I can always only be a better version of myself if I put myself in places that I'm like in discomfort. You know what? Since I already lost everything, I have nothing more to lose. Having that fear of death really gave me that perspective that I'm going to die tomorrow. People always assume that I wrote a book about death because I'm obsessed with it. I love the idea of death. I'm a stoic and all this kind of stuff. But I was just terrified. Like the science part of me just couldn't prove that there was something at the end of death or life. And that scared me.
Don't Be Caught Dead, the show bringing stories of death back to life. Here's your host, Catherine Ashton.
Today I'm speaking with Alicia Ng. Alicia is a brand and content marketing consultant and a multimedia creative who helps people and brands tell their stories clearly and intentionally. Her work spans industries and continents, from luxury and automotive to education and FMCG. But she's always chasing the same thread: how to make ideas land on a human level. This same curiosity spills into her creative work. She is the author of The Final Gift, a compassionate workbook on end-of-life planning, and Willow's Tea Tales, a children's story about presence and connection. She also hosts Stories in Transit, a podcast about life's pivots and identity shifts, inviting honest conversations about who we become in the messy middle of change. Thank you so much for being with us today, Alicia.
Thank you for having me.
So, Alicia, we briefly met only recently, and it was over a matcha, which was fantastic. And I have to say, it was so nice to talk about the common ground and complexity of working in end-of-life planning. But I found that you started off this because you have a fear of death.
Yeah, I do. People always assume that I wrote a book about death because I'm obsessed with it. I love the idea of death. I'm a stoic and all this kind of stuff. But I was just terrified. Like I have always been the child, the person who spiraled at night, going to my mom and crying, like, I don't want you to die. I don't want you to die. And very classic thanatophobia. At some point, I just realized that the fear isn't going anywhere. So I could either keep running away from it or run towards it like an unhinged person that I am. And it wasn't really a dramatic moment. It was just like kind of a mindset, maybe like having that growth mindset. Growth is really a core value for me. And I was always pushing myself towards something and going out the comfort zone. So I went into death literature because I did mention to you like Man's Search of Meaning, Staring into the Sun. I even picked up a fiction book that actually got started into this whole death or like actually going to the deep end, which is The Regrets of Clover. She's a death doula. So I'm like, what is a death doula? I heard of a doula. Don't know what a death doula is. Got curious, researched, and actually enrolled into a course because I was like, hey, I can probably hold space for people. Maybe I can hold space for myself. Got the certificate, and spoiler alert, I can't do it. I saw the gaps. I wanted to help people, but I just couldn't help them at the bedside because my thanatophobia would actually get to me at the end. So what I could do was actually write and create, and that's why as a journal person, I'm like journal, passion, knowledge, put it together, and that's how I have the end of life planning book. And it's just me pouring into everything that I know into this book and figuring out and hoping it will get to somewhere. Still don't know where it's gonna to, but I mean, I met you, so it went to somewhere.
It has. And tell me, let's go back a little bit about when
Yeah.
you first found out that you had that fear of death. Like you talk about your childhood. Was it nightmares that were the thing that you first started having, or are you comfortable talking about how you kind of realized you had this fear?
I think it was always, do you know, like when you're going through the day, you're overstimulated, you don't really think much about stuff. And it's that moments when you actually fall asleep and my brain will go to like, my mom is pretty young. She's like 55 this year. Still a lot of years left.
Yeah.
But I was 5, she was what, 40-ish? And I was like, I only have 40 years left of her. She's gonna die. If she's dying, I'm gonna die. And then I think about what comes after death. I'm born Buddhist. So it's a whole reincarnation, everything. I was in a Catholic school, so it's also all about religion and stuff. But the science part of me just couldn't prove that there was something at the end of death or life. And that scared me, like the whole not being able to exist, not knowing that you exist, and then it brought me to the what's the point of life, but that's another story. And it would just trigger this really intense fear, and I would just hyperventilate. So it would just be like struggling to breathe, screaming, kind of like having to pinch myself to center myself. And I think it's only like maybe 5 years ago when I actually went to the deaf literature and going through therapy and realized there was an actual phobia and there were people like me. Because whenever I explain I have this deaf and they're like, oh, we're gonna die in like 60 years, so much time, or try to placate me and say like, oh, you should focus on life, why are you thinking so much about death? But it just wouldn't go away. And I think that's also like the point of me going into this journey is trying to identify whether there is a way or there is something to kind of get over this fear. Like if I can get over the fear of heights, I'm probably going to get over this fear. But yeah, I'm still in the midst, in the throes of kind of figuring things out.
So, did you get over the fear of heights?
I did. I don't know where it went. One day I was just like, I am here on the 77th floor, looked down, I was like, it went away. I don't know what happened, but it went away.
That's really interesting because most people, when they start off with a fear, they think that they will have that fear for the rest of their life. But it sounds like you're in a position where you're challenging yourself.
100%. I would always put myself in situation. My friends always say I like to make life hard for myself. It might be a stoic thing again, voluntary hardship, call it whatever. But I feel like I can only grow, I can always only be a better version of myself if I put myself in places that I'm like in discomfort. I wouldn't say like extreme fear, but just like discomfort. And usually in this place of discomfort, kind of like find breadcrumbs of the universe, and then it leads to like having this book, having a book launch, meeting you, meeting new opportunities. And I think that's where I keep going towards.
And tell me a little bit about, you're obviously dealing in a new space with end of life planning and death now. But tell me, what were you doing before all of this?
I was living a very Singaporean life. For people who don't know what Singaporean life is, there is this thing called the Singaporean dream. You go to the top universities in Singapore, you get a job, you get married, you get a house, you live your happily ever after. I was on that trajectory and that career ladder, getting my first job, working in luxury cars. I worked with the top brands in like cars, amazing stuff. Went to become the content manager of Asia Pacific for spirits distribution, had my own consultancy. It seems like I'm going towards that. And December happened. So last year, December, a lot of things happened, and I feel like I just needed a clean slate. So I just wiped everything clean. And I was like, I have nothing on my plate right now. So what am I going to do with my life? Still remember I had the deaf doula certificate that wasn't being used. Just chance upon that fiction book that I mentioned to you. And I'm like, I'm going to sit down here. I'm going to create. Because I don't know about you, but I feel like my life purpose, I have to create. I have to create something. If not, life is a bit meaningless or purposeless. So I just sat there, created a book, finished the book in a month, and I talked to my mentor about it. He was like, you do realize no one finished a book in a month. I was like, do they not? What do you mean? But that was the state that I was in. And I think,
And was
and
that
also,
the children's
yeah,
book that you were working on?
no, it's actually this deaf book.
Oh, so it was the final
Yeah,
gift. Yep.
yeah. And to make my life harder again, I decided to apply for a visa to Australia and move to Australia. To make my life even harder, someone dropped in the idea of having a book launch, and I was like, I don't think Singapore would be a place that is accepting of this idea because you're still very Asian, very conservative. That topic is a taboo. And I'm like, I feel like Melbourne, Australia would be more receiving, more accepting audience. So I was like, let me just attempt to do a book launch, and it happened. So I am here. I don't know what's next, but I am here.
And tell me, was there a particular, you said that there was a lot going on in that December for you. Do you mind unpacking some of that, what that can be within your own comfortable space? Because
Yeah,
I think it's good for people to understand where you were at, because everyone at some point in their life has a lot of things going on, and sometimes it can feel too much and they want a clean slate, but they
yeah,
never actually go through that process. So to
yeah,
have you here would be is a great opportunity for us to sort of explore that.
yeah, sure. I tie a lot of worth and value to who I am in terms of productivity and work. So when it comes to career, being a manager, being someone who's always on top of her game is something that's very important to me. Productivity is the way that I see value in my space in this world. Very capitalistic and something that I'm learning right now. But in December, I had a really messy ending to a relationship. At the same time, I had a breakup message from a long distance best friend that came out of nowhere. I was going through family issues. My grandma was in a hospital. I decided to quit my job because it was toxic and it didn't pull through with the visa to Australia. So I basically lost everything I had in my status, my roles. And I was like, I'm sitting here with nothing. So what am I supposed to do? At the same time, because I was going through so much emotional stuff, I just said to my clients, like, I need to stop. I don't have the bandwidth to give you the best work. So I need to take a break and like thank you for everything and all this kind of stuff. So I was sitting there back in my family home and going like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I literally had no plans. I'm someone who usually have like a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. I know how my life is gonna look like, where it's gonna go, and suddenly it's just gone. It's just out of my like swept out of my feet. And I think that's the amount of grief that I was facing. Because I went to my therapist and she said you shouldn't have, you know, change up your life, move to a different country because you need to ground yourself and everything. I was like, you know what? Since I already lost everything, I have nothing more to lose. And I think that's the mindset I went to is like, I have nothing else to do. So what can I do now? I have no pride. Yeah, like ego wise, I think it's more like an ego death, if you believe in that. And yeah, I think that was my journey in December to maybe March, April.
And so you packed your bags and you moved to Melbourne.
Yes, I did.
But let me take us, before we talk about your experience in Melbourne, you take me back to New Zealand? Because
Yeah,
that's where you did the doula course, wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah.
How did you end up in New Zealand when you are doing a death doula course when you specialize in marketing and
Um,
brand?
yeah, I think when I was 28, I took my first leap of faith, which is quitting my corporate job and starting my consultancy business as a marketing and freelancer. So I think that's when I was like, oh, I have autonomy, I have freedom. Let me just go to a different country and live. Because I know I don't want to be in Singapore. I didn't prescribe to the way that Singaporeans or most Singaporeans live. I'm not shaming it. I'm just saying that it's not the life that I want. And moved to New Zealand because it's a new.
Is that Singapore dream that you explained earlier?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I moved to New Zealand because I'm like completely different landscape, way slower, trying to force myself to again unlearn any limiting beliefs or productivity capitalistic mindset. So at the same time when I was doing my consultancy, and because as a consultant, you'll be working lesser hour than full time. So I'm taking my time to like, what can I do? I did beekeeping, I did flower pollination, I did things that I would never do in anywhere of the world. And I wanted to be like, I have time. Let me learn something, pick something up. And yeah, I love learning. That's about it. So that was when I read the book. Oh, Deaf Doula. What is a Deaf Doula? Went to do it, did a bit of research since I had time. I was with my friend, my housemate then. And I said, like, do you know what a Deaf Doula is? Do you know that I can actually help people grieve when their loved ones are nearing the end of their life? And you're like, oh, I think it'll be a good thing for you. So found a course, did a course. It was supposed to be a 3-day course and I finished it in 1 day because that was how committed I was. So yeah, so that was how I got the Deaf Doula certificate. But I still couldn't get into palliative care because I know in theory it works. In theory, I could see myself doing that. But in reality, I know just being surrounded by people who are grieving or even seeing someone pass on would trigger my death phobia. And I feel like that is not a good combination to have.
And tell me, it seems to be a common thread with you that you will quite happily take a leap of, some people might call it a leap of faith or a risk or, to completely do something and put themselves outside their comfort zone. You've done this like not once but twice. You've moved to New Zealand. Beekeeping was amazing, and trying to become a death doula and doing some research on that, and then coming to Australia. Again, another wiping the slate clean moment for you. So, where do you think that this comes from?
I really think it's the fear of death because it's really having that fear of death really give me that perspective that I'm gonna die tomorrow. And I think by having that whole memento mori, remembering you will die, obviously we want to touch wood and be like, I'm gonna live a full life of 80 or 90. But it's really having that mentality like I might die tomorrow. So what would I regret if I not do something? And yeah, I'm someone who not sure if you are aware of the poet Sylvia Plath and her poem Victory, the way that she have different options.
That's weird because I actually love Sylvia Plath's poetry and studied her in my last year at school.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, so the Victory poem really stick to me because it's having the endless options of different lives. And it's always the case of like I'm not going to see myself behind the desk sitting for 40 hours. I remember getting into my first job and asking my supervisor, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Is this what I'm going to do? It's just Groundhog Day, autopilot. And I'm like, there has to be more than this. So once I felt like my time was up in Singapore, there was like the right circumstances. I don't feel ready, but I feel like I needed to change something. And I feel that the moment I get stagnant or maybe there's a breadcrumb from somewhere. Someone said, like, why don't you move to New Zealand? It would just be in my head. And if that idea is in my head for another 1 or 2 months, I'm going to do it. Again, I have to acknowledge that I'm also privileged enough to take this different leap of faith. I do not have any commitments. The worst case scenario is always going back to my family's home. If that is my worst case scenario. It isn't the worst. So I have to say that I'm privileged enough to do all of this. I'm not gonna, yeah, but it's really that memento mori, which is I'm gonna die tomorrow. So what can I do with today? What risk? When I say risk, it's also calculated risk. I'm not gonna be YOLO and like, spend all my savings, go travel the world and be like, what's next? But within my capability and my resources, what can I do to optimize my life right now?
It's really interesting that your fear of death has actually made you braver to live the life and also value more, put more value on the life that you're living now, which is really an interesting concept. And considering that you were raised as a Buddhist, you went to a Catholic education, with having exposure to both those different religions, it's surprising that your fear of death didn't actually motivate you to go down the path of faith. Was there a particular point in time that you recall that you realized that you were more of a science-based person, as you mentioned, rather than a faith-based person?
It was interesting because a lot of my friends who are religious would be like, have you considered, religion? And I was like, I really have. I went to literally all the religion like institute. I went to Hinduism, I went to Hindu temples, I went to Buddhist temple, read about Catholicism, went to so many churches, and like nothing stuck, nothing really fits me and be like, oh, I can believe this. And I heard of so many stories about people saying that their gods are speaking to them, and I love it for them, but I didn't have that experience. And because not having that experience, it's hard for me to acknowledge or kind of like get into it. Maybe one day it would happen, who knows? But right now it's more of the signs, not really like what my mind is telling me is that it's just gonna be nothing. It's just gonna be like slipping into a long sleep and just not waking up, that kind of stuff. So yeah, as much as I'll like to get into it and have a faith to kind of like anchor that fear, it is not happening for now. Yeah.
Okay, so we then arrive in Melbourne. And so this would have taken us to, was it December that you arrived of 2024?
No, it's April.
You arrived in April of 2025.
Yeah.
So made the decision started to make the decision and over that sort of 4 month process. What happened when you arrived?
Apartment hunting was one. Like the housing market here is insane. It was, yeah. Housing, I think it's like the logistics first. It's a very type A organized person. I'm like, logistics, I just want to get an apartment. I knew my goal in Melbourne is more of to like settle down because I've been doing that digital nomad life for quite a bit. Because in New Zealand, I was traveling every 2 weeks. Like I'll just up myself, go, new experience, novelty. Chasing novelty was a huge thing. Um, Moved to Australia, I was like, I am tired. December has trained me. I am tired. I really want to settle down. I want to stay here and force myself to stay because there is also learning and stillness. And I know myself. I know that I always chase chaos and just peace. So I'm choosing peace in Melbourne, and that's the whole theme. Try to build a community. Bumble Friends was going on to Bumble Friends, trying to meet people. I think we had a gathering and we were talking about books and how her mom was an author and she did book launch and my book came about and they're like, that is a really interesting topic. You should do a book launch. And Gia said like, oh, it has to be skulls, it has to be red and black, everyone can theme. I was just laughing it off. And the idea stuck with me. And I started thinking about what are the resources that I need to have a book launch. I had planned events for 800 over people. It's for like high net worth individuals. So event planning comes second nature to me, but it's the selling part, the RSVP, finding a venue. So I just shot my shot with a couple of contacts that I knew here because some of my ex-colleagues are here. And I just say like, hey, do you know anyone who want to do the venue? Because I wanted to do a book launch about that. And someone came through. So I had a meeting to them and I was like, oh, I think a book launch is gonna happen. So yeah, that was what happened in my 4 months here.
So tell me about the writing process. So and how it differentiates from when you did your children's book. And maybe we should
Yeah,
talk about your children's book first and your experience with that, and then how it was so different when you were doing
yeah,
your final gift.
yeah. So I journal a lot, and during my therapy session, my therapist also gave me like a list of 365 journal prompts. So one of them was if you were a book or a character, what would you be, etc. And I was like, I'm gonna be a witch. I'm gonna be a witch in enchanted woods. I'm gonna be doing teas. I'm gonna be healing people, all this kind of stuff. And somehow, I think I was also bored. I was really bored in New Zealand, and somehow I went like, oh, I think that could be a children's book, and that happened. And I found an illustrator, did it. And I was like, okay, a children's book is happening. It's very chill.
And what's the title of it again?
It's Willow's tea tale. So it's Willow the witch helping going around the Ever woods, I think. I can't believe I forgot the setting of my book. But it's a fantasy land. So it's woods helping like different people, healing them through like kind words and also tea. And I love tea. So the end of the book has to actually have like 4 tea recipes that anyone can do. So it's like very chill. It's a bit about homeopathy as well. So like, lemon, ginger, elderberries, things that help you. So that was a very chill, fun children's book situation. And seeing it come to life, I was like, a book. But the death book was, I saw a gap. I think it's also bigger backstory. In the last maybe 3 years, I lost my paternal grandmother and my aunt. And for my paternal grandmother, it was immediately once we know that she was gone, my dad just jumped into like funeral planning, super like organized, tick, tick, tick kind of checklisting. And I think the entire family only kind of realized that she was gone or felt that she was gone when she was being cremated. So can you imagine like when she was going up in flames and everyone's like, she's gone. I was like, should have thought about it earlier. And it was just jarring for me, that experience. That wasn't my first death. I had like great grandparents and my godfather passing away, but I was too young to understand. I just know I didn't want to go near the coffin. I refused to go near any coffins.
And when you say that, did you witness the cremation?
Yeah, I did. So
Can
I
you
was
talk us a
in,
little bit about that?
yeah,
Because it might be different to how we actually have, or people have experienced it here. So if
yeah.
you can talk about that, that'd be great.
My experience with the crematorium is a bit iffy because I realize that I dissociate sometimes when things get a bit traumatic. So
That's okay.
yeah, I just remember going to like we were at a funeral and then it was the coffin bearers or pall bearers bringing her to the car and driving to the crematorium. We were all standing there actually and watching her coffins go into the crematorium, getting cremated, etc. And everyone was just witnessing from a distance. So it just
Yeah.
felt like I didn't feel like it was humane at all. There was no sense of that coffin is my grandma. It was just a coffin going into something getting burnt. Very detached, a very detached feeling. And yeah, so that was, I think, when people realize that she's gone, there isn't you don't see her face, you don't feel her presence, there's nothing about it, or that nothing about that funeral or that process that was her.
And Alicia, how old were you when you experienced this? So it was in the last 3 years, was it? Did you say?
Yeah. So I think it's like 25, 26.
And this was the first funeral that you can remember being present at.
I think my godfather one was the first one that I remember because I remember vicariously I refused to go near the coffin. And that's because he passed away in a very horrific motorbike accident. I didn't want to see the body. I was there because I think in Buddhist culture, we have like a 3-day practice where we're just folding like hell money or like paper money to burn off for the one who had passed on. Because like burning paper money actually allows them to have a better afterlife where they get more richer. So the more that you burn, the more that you fold, it's more like practice and prayers that will get to them to the afterlife. So that was the first one that I remember. The second one was my grandmother, and the most recent one was during COVID where my aunt passed away and she was going through terminal cancer. So she finally passed on from the terminal cancer, but it was during COVID. So it was one of the unfortunate times that you can't really have a funeral. You can't really have people going to the hospital. And she was really weak. She didn't really have a will. So post not only that funeral or that ceremony was really sad because not a lot of people can go there. Because of the will, the logistics, and also the practical matters, there's a lot of tension in the family of where goes to who and all this kind of stuff. And I found that I'm gonna use quite a heavy word, but it's just disgusting. Like grief is already so heavy, put on top of like paperwork, and now you're fighting over materialistic goods. To me, there has to be a better way in grieving or in celebrating someone's life. This is not a celebration. This is not an act of love. Yeah.
And was it that sort of what you experienced during that time and the lack of planning that you saw and the impact that that had on your loved ones? How did that then inform how you went through with your writing process?
I think when I wrote my book, there was 3 objectives, and I think the first thing we covered was really that memento mori, trying to live life a bit more intentionally and also not on autopilot, which is why the first part of the book is a life review. I want people to think, am I doing right in my life? Am I living on autopilot? Am I showing up fully? Is this a life that I want to continue living with clarity? And I feel that once you realize, or once you do the live review, I'm hoping that people will actually realize that they don't have much time, in the sense that I have already gone through so much in my life, my romantic relationships, my childhood, my first career. There's only so much more. And when they think about every choice, every conversation, every meal, I hope would matter to them a bit more, because time is fleeting and this life is fleeting. So that's really that presence of autopilot, choices that really reflect the life that you want. And the second part is where the gap comes across, because I want to make this book ease, or is a manual for family members or even loved one, to kind of make life easier when you or even a family member pass. So there's that gap, and I want to ease that weight, not because I want people to think about death all the time, but it's more of an act of love. And some people may also give me the counter arguments like, I'm not going to have kids, my family members are going to pass on outside me. And I was like, but you still matter. At the end of the day, you're still a human being. You still matter. You still live in the memories of people. And if you really, really want to be objective, someone still have to plan your funeral. So do it for them, whoever that person is. So that's really the second objective, which is take that burden off people you love, give them a really clear-cut manual of what they want to do. And I acknowledge that some people will be like, what if your family is conservative, conventional, and you want to do things that's outside that? Which is why in some parts of the book, I say, like, you have to give flexibility for your family members to do things within their resources, their means, and the cultural appropriation. And that's something that we have to acknowledge. Like, we would love to throw the biggest grand ballroom funeral, whatever, but if it's not within our means, we can't have it. And I think the last objective is just my favorite. It's really the namesake, which is the final gift, because that's the last physical thing I believe would be left of you. It will be holding love, clarity, memories, playlists, legacy projects, just something for your family to remember you after. And I think I'm making a bold assumption here that we all want to be remembered. We all want to matter. So we rarely give ourselves the permission to decide how that look like. And I think this book is that permission, is that opportunity, that gateway into how you will be remembered. So it's really about empowering people to leave clarity, love, and themselves as them behind. And yeah, so this is how it came about when I was writing the book. Was it therapeutic? Yes. Was it also confronting? Extremely.
I have to thank you, firstly, Alicia, for being so open and honest with your responses. And at any time you can certainly,
Yes.
say no, we're not going to go there. But do you mind sharing, you know, just what were the challenges that you faced? What were the things that you found confronting when you were having to think through this process?
Yeah. I cried a lot when writing this book, which was the first, because I write poems when I was younger, and it's always like a channel or like cathartic to kind of bring that across. And it's more like I cried, therefore I wrote a poem instead of I wrote, therefore I cried. And that's not because I was thinking about death, but I was thinking a lot about my life, my childhood, my family childhood, my relationship with people. There is this prompt that I put in, is like, who are the top three friendships in your life? And I was like, am I even going to make on anyone list? I was like, how dare they? So it's really thinking about life, who I am, the essence of me that I changed. It was also, I don't think I was writing for strangers at certain points of time, because I was writing for that version of myself who probably didn't know better yet, or didn't have the permission to dream and think that I was gonna have a book launch, have a book. And the last thing I was thinking was also my parents, because they spend so much of their lives in survival mode. And I talk a lot about privilege. And I also have the privilege of, living my life in the sense that I can slow down, I can create, I can choose to upend my life and move overstate if I didn't. So I thought about them, and it felt so like heavy and secret. And it was also ego confronting, not just emotionally confronting. I had the very classic imposter syndromes going, like, what if I get something wrong? What if people think that I do not have the authority to write about death? I mean, I'm 30, I'm healthy, I'm thriving. I didn't have any close family members pass from me. Or even like, what if no one gets it? What if no one care? Because again, I come from Singapore, death is a taboo, no one wants to talk about it. A lot of my Asian friends also like, what do you want to think about death? I don't think it's a good thing. The more you talk about it, the more it will come to you, kind of like superstition. So yeah, it's also that fear of being seen. And I double check with like lawyer friends, insurer friends, put disclaimers saying that this is just something that is of a personal journal, then it will not overpower your will, your power of attorney, etc. But I think the last thing is also that writing this book, I thought would get magically rid me of my fear of death. It doesn't. Spoiler alert again. I still get the late night spirals at 11 p.m. I'm not gonna exist panic. And that hasn't gone away. I don't think it will go away. But I think for me, it's just keep pushing the edge further. And if it's gonna stay, it's fine. It can ride shotgun, but it's not gonna drive.
And what do you hope people get out of the book when they read it and when they go through the different prompts that you've provided?
A whole bunch. I think one surprising factor when I wrote the book pre and post was I was writing a book about death. And again, people are like, why are you obsessed with it? You don't need to get to it yet. I'm not going to die yet. But when I launched my book to a group of like 30 people from 25 to 70, and I asked one question, which I assume would have a few hands up. And it was, what would you do if someone passed on? No one had an answer. I was like, what do you mean you're not gonna call a funeral director? I think that really hit me and goes like, this is why I'm creating this. This is why this book exists, because no one have that education, no one have that literacy to kind of understand what they're gonna do. And again, it's still making the assumptions we have infinite Mondays, we have infinite tomorrows to do this and learn about this. So I really want to have that awareness in realizing like what happens when someone passes, even educating them on the glossary of vocabulary, like what is the power of attorney? What is will? What is death insurance? And also allowing them to understand there's a huge amount of tasks to do once someone passes. Have you even considered where your pets are going to go? Have you considered your Wi-Fi password? Do you know what your mom's Facebook password is? People are going to message her like, happy birthday on a birthday, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, it's really just during the educational, during that awareness, because I assume being in my head for the last 30 years that these are all information that will come naturally. But when I released this book, I realized that that's missing. And I think that's another gap that I want to fill, not for my sake. Like, I'm not going to go around being like, oh, I'm the best. I know everything about death. I don't. But I want to be that spark of conversation that gets to people and it's like, oh, I'm now thinking about death. I think I know what to do next. Like just having that sense of security for them would, I think, would be an achievement or a little bit of success on my end.
And tell me, what were some of the responses from people when you had the book launch?
Someone cried, which to me was a success factor. I'm like, I made someone cry. I'm very happy because I feel like that's the emotional response. And I like back to human psychology. Once you have an emotional response, you know there's gonna be an action point later. I think that's where I'm trying to get the very normal stuff like what is a coffin, who's gonna hold my coffin, what is a power of attorney, what is a death doula. And it's really just asking questions, which to me was great because curiosity come in. And a lot of people, or actually one person actually went like, oh, this is a bit confronting, isn't it? I was like, yes, which is why we're here, which is why I'm trying to make this like educational and understandable for layman terms. One person even started creating her funeral playlist, and there was like Total Africa. I was like, I love it. Congrats. Continue building on your playlist. And people also came up to me and saying that they have been considering having a death doula because they didn't know of the existence of that role, which is also another great stuff. So I think all in all, what I'm trying to say is that from questions going like, huh, skepticism and everything, and actually being there and seeing why I created this book and it's for them, and seeing that lack of knowledge that they have actually spurred the conversation further. And I think that's what I was really happy about at the end. And I also even have the deaf bingo to improve the glossary because like here's the deaf bingo of stuff you probably wouldn't understand. Go around and chat with people so that you can somewhat understand or come to me. Yeah.
That'd be great if you can actually talk through, because your intention was very specific about how you wanted to have the book launch and the location and the activities. So, could
Yeah.
you talk through that and just explain what those intentions were?
Yeah. I think given my background as a marketing professional, I approached this as a full marketing professional point of view. What was my objective? What is the tone that I'm going through? What is that gap that I am missing? So the gap is always people think that death is taboo. I'm not going to die yet. So my way, even on my social media, first of all, I make the theme color pink. I am not a fan of pink. Pink is friendly. It's approachable. So I made it pink. The whole aim was to make death casual, not in the sense that it is like making it of a joke, but more is it like lighthearted. So I want things to be really lighthearted, very casual, very fun. It's a place for connection. So the venue was actually Croissantoria, which is a place that is known for their croissants. I'm like, what makes it better than talking about death with a pastry in hand? Amazing stuff. So
I love that.
I know. And the whole event flow would just be like mingling, sitting people down, getting your croissant, getting your drinks, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, depending on who and what you want, going into explaining the thing. I try to keep it as short as possible because I know like information overload, wanting to drive my point across, bringing like storytelling, etc. And then breaking into activities because we want people to know, we want people to have questions. And I love bingo. I don't think anyone hates bingo. It's super chill, super casual. And I made it into a death bingo, which is, do you want to have a theme funeral? Do you want only colors funeral? Is there a funeral playlist? Do you have a insurance done? And it's more of getting people to connect with. Some came alone, so I want people to actually talk to others, have a room of conversations. And it's always like, oh, you want to have a team funeral? What team is it gonna be? And actually etching that conversation into their mind. So it's really just a dinner party with depth, a bit of like emotional, practical, unhinged. I want people to laugh, to tear up, and just make it very accessible, like make the entire topic of death accessible. I think that was where I'm getting into. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I've had, and I think we've talked about this, my event experiences has been running pub quiz
Yeah.
because, who doesn't love a pub quiz as well? It's a bit like bingo.
Yeah.
And they have been hugely successful of allowing people to have curiosity and explore the topic of death and end of life planning, but in a non-threatening way.
100%. Another thing that I try to do with my community here in Melbourne is also to, you know how some people do like PowerPoint presentation nights? I was like, do you want to go have lunch and write in our books together? So I'll force them to write in their books as well.
I love that. I love that. Forced journal dates. I like that.
Yes.
And tell me, where to from here, Alicia?
That is a question that I really don't know the answer to because right when I upend my life in New Zealand, I don't think I know what is next anymore. But I'm really leaning towards the in between right now. I'm waiting for the universe to drop some download, be like, okay, let's have a book launch in Canberra for some reason, or even just a book launch back in Singapore. But creatively, I'm still building. I'm trying to explore and obviously have chats with people like you about death and awareness to see whether there's any collaboration or even like the next idea that we can just have a bunch of people connect over death and dinner, have book launches and events across Australia, even back home. But I think right now it's really just living, as I said to you, from having that very edge mindset in me as a Singaporean, very perfectionist, having to do and optimize my life is really just living, making memories with my friends, starting new projects, saying yes to things that feel aligned. I don't have a 5-year plan anymore, just a compass. So I'm just saying yes to things that feel aligned. And as I said, trying to live like I'm gonna die tomorrow, even if maybe today I have to rest because death would be a bit hard. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like that, from where you first explained that you were and to where you are now, where you wait for the universe to, show you the breadcrumbs and
Yeah,
signs of where you might end up. That's quite a
yeah,
transition.
it is. It is huge, huge unlearning to do, huge therapy sessions on how am I falling back to my old habits because it feels safe, because it's comfortable and it's certain. And I think the biggest lesson right now is just trying to trust the process. I even got a tattoo, a huge one over here to remind myself to go with the flow because I am so known for fighting against the flow. I'm so stubborn and rigid in my ways. And this 3 years has just been me trying to maybe smoothen out the edges and accept that this is where life is going to bring me, wherever that is.
I love the fact that even though you still have your fear of death, you've really during this process worked out what your values are and what's important to you. But most importantly, you're putting yourself first. Because I think that you can't do anything moving forward if you're not taking yourself and putting yourself first and central to the narrative. And I think that that's so important. So I really do wish you the very best for wherever your breadcrumbs lead you from here on in, Alicia.
Thank you. I think something that my therapist also told me, or something that I'm trying to live, is alchemizing my trauma and my fears and making it a space or even a product for people to heal.
Wow, if all of us only had that clarity for what we could do. So that's really beautiful, Alicia. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being so open and honest and sharing your vulnerability with us.
Thank you for having me here as well. I appreciate it a lot.
Don't be caught dead forgetting to subscribe. And here are some more videos we know you'll love.